Call to order Public Hospital District Number 4, King County Board of Commissioners. It's Wednesday, January 23rd, 2019, and it is 6:32, and we are opening our meeting with a call to order and now a flag salute.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would the clerk call the roll, please?
President Norris?
Here.
Vice President Herron?
Here.
Secretary Spikers?
Here.
Commissioner Young?
Here.
Commissioner Pollard?
Here.
Thank you. Do I have a motion for an approval of the agenda this evening?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, then we'll move to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, it passes. Now we have topics of discussion. Who do I turn this over to?
I'll take it.
Okay, Dr. Wickop, you're on.
Do you need to do it? Huh? Do you need to do it since I'm right here? You want to sit there and do it? Yeah. The clicker's right there. It's the next one down. Right there.
You want to sit here?
All right, well, we're slightly off, maybe a month off on doing the quarterly quality report, but we'll get caught back up here real fast. So I believe you have all of these in your, this?
No.
Yeah, okay. You have all of this in your packet.
Mhm.
So the things that we're going to go over, and again, I crammed a lot in, and so I'll slow down if anybody wants me to slow down in pieces. Or I'll just keep breezing through so we can get to some of the other topics tonight. But so I've got the quality dashboard, which we look at each time. And then I pulled out 3 other areas to drill down on that I thought were very important for you all to hear about. And I aggregated them all. They're around the world of pharmacy. So we have 3 big projects that have gone on this year, and a couple of them still going on. And so spend some time looking at those and the performance measures in that area. But as far as the dashboard, I did it a bit different this time. And so you have a handout that at the it's like this. So it's a series of measures, and the front and the back page look a lot alike. So if you just look at the bottom right and find page 1, that's where we'll be starting. So these are the 8 dashboard measures that we bring here for you to look at. And so I'm trying this display, so your feedback is welcome as far as the display. And so each of the measures, it is both a graphic display as well as a table display. And these are the things that we've spent time on already as a group looking at. I just want to keep bringing them back to you. And so the measures that you're looking at are for the last 3 months of the year, so September, October, and November. That's where we are right now as far as putting measures into the system is the end of November. So the very first measure that you see there is hospital-acquired infections. And so our measures is the red, the graphic on the left. The middle graphic is our state average, and then the graphic on the right is everyone who participates in the nation in this particular program. So you'll see that our hospital-acquired infections continue to be higher, and there continues to be work on this. This, though, is trending slowly downward. We'd like to see it move farther than it is right now, but definitely moving downward.
But it's still only less than 1 per 100 patient days, is that correct?
It is. You are correct. Yeah,
So
it is less
it's very
than
minimal. Even though on a chart like this, it looks alarming.
that. Yeah. Our goal still is even less than that, but thank you for pointing out that it's still not horrendous. It's not like every patient left and right is suffering from this.
And, don't we have, aren't we more susceptible to a higher average just because of our patient mix too?
Because we have a smaller patient volume, yes, the calculation, we're more susceptible to that, and any little change in any direction can result in a dramatic change in the calculation from one to the next. The second measure is unassisted patient falls. So remember, these are the falls when the patient does actually go to the ground. And we are actually considered a best practice top performer in this, because you'll see how low they are. So this is really important for us to show to our staff, because they are just devastated anytime a patient does fall, you know, and it's always that balancing act between allowing patients to have autonomy. They're on their way home, so, and that's often when they get most impulsive.
So a patient can get up and go to the garden on the second floor or walk around, let's say a swing bed patient has the autonomy to walk around, right?
The answer is yes, and I'm with a caveat that says that many patients that we will place requests on them that they not do that independently until they've been kind of checked for safety to do that. So many of them in the beginning we'll say, please don't get up without assistance, and somebody will respond to the call, let you help them. They do eventually work their way up to being fully independent, and that's usually in just the last couple of days when they're ready to head home.
That's why they have the alarms on beds.
It is,
Yeah, yeah. And even occasionally a bed on the floor, which I don't think they do anymore, do they?
You mean the call lights?
No, beds with alarms, beds on the floor.
No, not beds on the floor.
Yeah,
Alarms
some-
on the beds.
I've seen nursing homes where a patient
Yeah.
would get out of bed all the time, so they ended up putting them on the floor
Yeah,
so
they
they
do
wouldn't
some
get
of
hurt.
that.
We
In nursing
can't-
homes,
we
they,
can't
not here.
do that, and that's because we have an obligation not only for patient safety, but staff safety.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
not safe for
No,
a
it's
staff
not.
member.
In a nursing home, yes, they,
Yeah.
They do.
to
So,
prevent falls.
If we have somebody who's that prone to getting out of bed, then we have a sitter with them.
Yes, we talked about that before.
Right. The next graphic then is the pneumococcal immunization rates. And so we did great numbers there. And these are measurements for our inpatients only.
What is the,
Prevnar 23 that they're getting?
It depends on which they're due for, because they may be due for the 23 and they may be due for the 13.
why is the QHI average a lot lower?
I don't really have insight into how the other hospitals, you know, where they're not able to get their numbers up. So the QHI is the comparison group of all the people across the country who use this product.
Do we have more prevalence of that particular stage in this area of the country because of the?
No, this is just your rate of successfully immunizing patients against pneumonia. So, you know, we've got some protocols that we've introduced. We did not perform very well on this for quite a while, and this was work that we had to do to put some processes in place to consistently immunize those who needed it. And so we've gotten much better, and you can see that the performance, how good it is now at this point in time.
So is that for all arrivals into inpatient care?
Correct.
But it still is up to them whether they receive the immunization or vaccination.
If they are offered and refuse, we are still credited with doing our part on this measure.
Mhm.
It's just the way the national measure is set up.
So you're not dinged because they refused?
That's correct.
Yes.
Our part is to get them to the point of
Asking
making
him.
a decision one way or another. The fourth measure here on the first page is pressure ulcers, and so I apologize that the PU, but I don't, the control, I don't have control on the way these are titled. They're titled by the national office that does these, but PU stands for pressure ulcer. So you'll see we had a pressure ulcer in here, and that's what's being measured, but only one.
That's really more common in a nursing home, isn't it?
It is, and I wish I could tell you we had zero, but we still on occasion will have. All right, ready to go to page 2? All right, same thing, top to bottom. On page 2 is our CAUTI rates. CAUTIs are a variety of healthcare associated infections, so it's just pulling that out. And as you will very well recall, this has been a topic that we've had for conversation for months and months and months. Lots of projects to bring this rate down, and it is definitely coming down.
What is CAUTI? Remind us.
Catheter-associated UTI.
Urinary
Okay,
tract infection.
thank you.
So nice drop there. The second measure is called a 3-hour sepsis bundle. This is a brand new measure for us, and I've gone ahead and put it on your dashboard because I think it's important for you to see also. Sepsis in this last year has become a focal point at a national level, and the issue isn't about sepsis itself, it's about recognizing it early. And so that's what all the interventions have been around, is how do we recognize sepsis far earlier than we have in times past. So there are some key things that you should look for, things that you should do, and that's what's being measured right here, and that's why the word bundle is there's several things you have to do correctly in order to get credit on this measure.
What causes sepsis?
An infection that is causing the body to kind of go into a shutdown, it's a toxic state. So it could be, it's an infection at any place in the body, but the body's response to it is poor. The body is losing.
So this is not necessarily a hospital-acquired infection.
That's correct.
They could come in with this.
And this is, most commonly they're coming in with it, but it does also measure when sepsis is developing in an inpatient setting.
Thank you.
Yeah, it captures them both. So again, brand new measure that we're just launching out on. We did a large-scale learning activity with the collaborative. We hosted that. I think we talked about it in medical committee. We hosted that event in the late fall. So now this is the launch of the quality measures that go with it. So the next time we look at this, you will see numbers. The third measure here on page 2 is swing bed patients who return to their prior level of care. So you want that number to be high. You want people to go back to where they came from.
Is that a percentage rate?
It is a percentage rate. Right. So that is, whatever that is, 85% of our patients, when they're discharged, they're returning at least to the same level that they started from. So if they came from home, they went back home. If they came from an assisted living, they went back to an assisted living. Came from an adult family home, they went back. So that's what we aim for. Our goal is if we get 75%, we feel like that's doing really good. So 85% exceeds what we're looking for. And then the final measure is at one of our stroke measures. And this is, do we get them to the CT scanner within 20 minutes of being recognized as a stroke? So, and we're part of a national program called Coverdale. It's just it's a funded research project, a funded grant to see how we can improve stroke care in rural communities.
What's it called, Cloverdale?
Coverdale. It's
Coverdale.
if you just take the L out of Cloverdale. It's called Coverdale, that's a person's name.
Are we prepared to respond within 20 minutes,
Yes.
24 hours a day?
24 a day, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And we've been doing our own internal measures for a while. We're just starting with this program, and so that's why there's no entries there. Any questions? This will be your dashboard for a while, so we'll be looking at these every quarter. The same dashboard will come to you.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see in the next quarter if it's
Yeah.
coming.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let me take you through a few other things. So these are what I already warned you about, and so you have these slides. Controlled substances, as you know, this is a big issue at a national level. And what this is kind of an overview of all the things that we do here internally to try and claim responsibility in our prescribing of controlled substances. The key goals are, number one, that you don't contribute to excess opioids out in the community, and that you don't contribute to misuse or crime or addiction in the patient. So the top left kind of green colored boxes is what we want to do is use it when it's appropriate. So we don't avoid using opioids, but just use it when it's appropriate and avoid getting it transitioned to chronic use. So you will see that the first thing you do is try and do a non-controlled substance whenever possible. We limit the days of prescriptions that can go out for a younger person or an adult. The risk of addiction is much higher the younger the person is when they're exposed, so that those teenagers are really, really important. And many of the addiction issues can be traced back to those teenagers that had their wisdom teeth removed and they got narcotics from the dentist. And that started it all.
Dentists.
So the dentists have joined in with a lot of these efforts here. There's also the prescription monitoring program that is done at the state level, and you check it. So as a prescriber, you go in and check that site anytime that you're going to be prescribing narcotics, so you can see what other prescriptions has this patient been receiving from other prescribers in the state. Again, it's just a check. If you see questionable practice, questionable prescribing, then you should not follow through on your prescription.
Where is, I can't see that item on this list, where is that?
I'm sorry, it's the third bullet point in the
On
green
side.
box.
That right? Okay,
The PMP?
so is that a national requirement, that prescription monitoring
It
program?
has become a national requirement. Meaningful use 3, that's just going into effect. It has a requirement for usage of the prescription monitoring program.
It says long-acting opioids never prescribed by the ED.
Right.
Is that something, is there a reason when someone will need something?
There are correct times
I
for a
see.
long-acting substance. They aren't the things that you go to an emergency room for.
Because if you're in an emergency, then you're not going to stay there
Right.
very long, you hope. You hope they take care of you and you move on. And if you move on after having opioids, then what happens?
If someone needs it, then they have to go to the hospital to get that, if that's
The
needed,
long-acting?
necessary.
No. You would, a clinician, somebody in the clinic would prescribe long-acting opioids if the reasoning is
I
appropriate.
see. Okay.
But those reasons just don't exist in an emergency room.
Oh.
When you break your leg,
Mhm.
twist your ankle, have diverticulitis, none of those are reasons for a long-acting opioid.
Mhm.
Those are perfectly good reason for short-acting.
Mhm.
I'm going to go to the bottom left. It's a little out of order, but it's oversight. So this is just things that we do in the organization, just watching. We're constantly surveilling. So we do have peer review ongoing, which means we keep it unmasked. All of our providers have concurred. I'm not sure they had a choice, but they concurred that they will see each other's names associated with their prescribing patterns. So, and what we're looking for is, did you comply with the limited number of prescriptions, and did you comply with checking the PMP? And we also look at some other things in the avoid misuse. And so they see one another's performance on a regular basis. And we also have reports about checking the PMP. I get that from the state. And then we just do random audits. We'll go in and just take a look and all good. We have really great providers. They're very thoughtful about this, and we are so far ahead of the curve. As a bunch of rules came out in October, November, December, January, depending on who your license comes from. There are a lot of rules came out. We've already been doing the majority, all but one of those rules we had already had in place for over a year. And so, and one rule we didn't have in place it was a very specific form of education that you needed to hand to the patient. So
I think we've had this for 5 years,
we've
at
been doing it
least,
quite a while.
way before the federal rules.
We're ahead of the game. Huh?
Yeah, we've been ahead of the game here.
Mm.
So just in the right-hand column then is how do we help patients to avoid misuse? So we do things like a contract with the patient. So, and that is really putting some boundaries and some agreements around how controlled substances will be used. We do random drug screens. We're very consistent in regard to the rules, in some cases the contract rules about how we do refills. We never do them early. If a prescription is lost, if a bottle is lost, if the new prescription is lost, the contract says if it's lost, we're sorry, it can't be refilled. We're happy to give you non-controlled substances until the next time it would have been filled. If you got a 30-day supply in 30 days, we'll get you more, but you have to own the protection of this. We do a lot of electronic submission of prescriptions, and that's just to prevent this piece of paper from floating around in the community. Then we know that the prescription went to the pharmacy if we send it electronically.
That would mean you send the actual picture of the prescription. Because the reason I ask is because some time ago, my primary care physician wanted to prescribe oxycodone, but she said, I cannot do this over the phone or digitally. I have to give you a written prescription and you have to take it
Pretty much
in.
all narcotics.
Yeah.
So how does that fit with that?
That's a great question. So they at a federal level are moving more and closer towards mandating that all controlled substances are sent electronically, the same way that your physician said she couldn't do, but actually moving towards it. There is a mechanism for doing that. You sign up for it, so probably 60% of our clinicians are doing electronic prescribing of controlled substances. It requires a dual authentication, so not only do they have a password that they put in to send the prescription, but we have a secondary form of identification, and that can be, there's different options. It can be on your computer, on your phone. I use a little fob. That there's a unique number that I've got to enter along with my password. That number's constantly regenerating every minute. It's a new number that I have to put in simultaneously. But that is a change. So depending on when you had that conversation, it may have changed since then, or she may not have been set up to do the electronic.
I don't know, but I was quite surprised. But the good thing was that I had that in written form, took it home, and I got to thinking about opioids. And
Decided not to do it, huh?
I decided not to fill it, and not only that, I mailed it back to her
Nice.
and told her
Nice,
that I decided not to get on the opioid track.
nice.
That's good from both a health
Yeah.
perspective. Your physician knows that you did not take them,
Exactly.
and then
Good
you made a
point.
good choice. But,
Yeah.
You still control of.
yeah, you know, but she didn't assume later that you had.
Yeah, that's a good point I hadn't thought of.
And because you never filled it, you were never on the PMP. Just so you know, you're out there. The next to last one I also would, or the last two, point out, if we ever get a report that somebody is misusing, we have a process that we immediately respond to that. The patient actually is called in and asked to submit drug sample or a urine sample right then. And sometimes we say, I'm sorry your neighbor isn't me. I'm sorry your neighbor chose this way to be ugly to you, but we got this report and you need to come in and give us a urine sample. And then we will, if somebody violates their contract, then we're pretty quick to say, you will receive no more controlled substances from us. You can still receive care, but no more controlled substances.
How often do you perceive, through all sorts of ways, that you're being shopped for opioids? How often does that happen?
It used to happen a lot, but word has gotten out. It is those who are misusing are a network of themselves. They often, that's how they help one another find the source. And so word gets out that we have a lot of barriers in place. But so now it doesn't happen that often. Probably the emergency rooms where it still happens. And so in the emergency room, if someone won't present their ID, we tell them at that moment, if they won't present their ID, we'll say, we are happy to take care of you. It's not a problem, but the one thing we can't do is provide narcotics to you if we don't have an ID. And it's not uncommon if that person chooses just to kind of leave.
Interesting.
That's surprising.
Alrighty, let's just keep moving forward, still on emergency department and medications. And this is about pharmacy verification of medication orders in the emergency department. So on the left-hand side is kind of what has traditionally been the story. And the traditional process is that all medication orders for inpatients and all medication orders for any scheduled outpatient go through a pharmacist review process before the med is administered. But the emergency department has historically claimed the urgency of the care we deliver here is too fast-paced to allow time for a pharmacist to verify the medications. And if we were going to staff somebody in the emergency department, that just costs too much to have them there. Now, think back, it has not been that long that we've had the computer. And so in times past, the pharmacist would have to physically be in the emergency department. The Board of Pharmacy has really been thinking about this, and several years ago, they paused and said, I don't think we're right to allow this any longer. They said, it's the urgency of the care in the emergency department, which is exactly why you need somebody coming in and doing a double check, because that's your perfect opportunity to make errors, to make choices that in the heat of the moment that you couldn't quite get done. Now, if you move to the most emergent of care, we actually have highly standardized protocols then. It's actually pretty hard to make a mistake when you're in the most emergent of situations. The things that we're doing then, we are almost doing by muscle memory. We train and certify on those things so much. Somebody's coming in with a heart attack. We're resuscitating them. They're in the midst of a stroke. We've just got protocols for that. So it's that in-between person that we have a great opportunity to make errors. So the Board of Pharmacy has been saying, you know what, the law says that medications before they're administered need to be reviewed by a pharmacist. And so we're going to start doing that. So at the last Board of Pharmacy survey that we had, we got a deficiency for this. And I throw up here, as have all other hospitals that the Board of Pharmacy has surveyed. So we were not special in that we got that. We all got
Aren't you glad?
We all got the same deficiency.
And that deficiency was what specifically?
The deficiency was you're not having a pharmacist verify your medication orders before they're administered in the emergency department.
So if you've got a crash going on, if you have something serious going on, there's a lot of people there, they're all working at the same time, they all have different tasks, and somebody can say, let's get them this, and run off and do it instead of having a big picture.
What happens if the pharmacist is not available?
So the scenario is you need to figure out a way to have the pharmacist available. That's the Board of Pharmacy's position. So Mr. Pollard, we asked ourselves all these questions, and there was even a time when we said, I'll confess, we said, just take our lumps. Let's just take our lumps. This is a problem that is hard. Let's see what everybody else does, and then we'll follow suit. Somewhere in the middle of the year, this last year, we just kind of looked at one another and said, we don't know that it can't be done. We presume it can't be done, but this really is a patient safety issue. And that's when we paused and said, all those things that are really of high urgency, we have protocols for them. It's all the other things that are in between that's not pressing. There can be another 4 minutes, another 5 minutes, another 15 minutes, just to get a double check. So in October 8th, in fact, we launched having the pharmacist review medications before they're administered, with some exceptions as part of the protocol.
How do you get a hold of a pharmacist at 1 in the morning?
We have 24/7 pharmacist coverage.
Could you stay and come out of the pharmacy?
Is that
So are they on call or what?
So the wonders of technology. So yes, we have so during the day, so from 8 in the morning to 6 at night, we have our pharmacists that are here doing it. And then once they depart, they turn over to a remote company called Cardinal Pharmacists. And so they're watching our boards, they're watching a multitude of other hospital med boards out there.
How much does this cost?
I don't even know.
Finance
we're-
committee needs to know.
Launching this did not add any expense. We've had Cardinal under
Yeah.
contract since
Or no help?
2007,
Since I got here,
2008.
yeah, in 9, so, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is, we just added to the work hours that we were already paying them for.
We don't have
No
that
other
many
expense. What's
calls,
that?
do we?
What's that?
We don't have that many calls, do we? That is after hours
There's
too.
a lot. They do. They do a lot. I mean, between the emergency room, between new prescriptions being added to our inpatients, we utilize them. And in fact, I was just looking at the utilization rates today. So it's an awesome value for our money, what we get, and not having to pay a pharmacist to physically be here. Yeah. So just to give you perspective, here's the things that we measure in this. I already told you that the concern was that it's going to take too much time. So we said, then let's commit to doing it in less than 15 minutes. So you just look at the implementation weeks, because obviously we had a learning curve there. So by week 4, it was being done under 7.5 minutes. It's now being done in under 6 minutes on average. And then the percent of times that we are within goal. So of all the administrations, how many of them were within 15 minutes? Pretty quickly, we got it up there, 90, 94, 92%. We actually did abandon that measure. We just narrowed it down to the 2 measures that you see in week 12. And override means that we don't want a patient to be compromised here. So if there is a delay in the pharmacist getting in and doing the approval, and it is a medication that the on-the-floor team says we need to get this med, they have a way of getting the med. It's called an override. They can access the medication. They can administer it. And so this is the measuring the number of overrides that happen. So it's going down, down, down.
Do those require a report or special justification after the fact?
They have to write, when they're extracting the medication from the supply cabinet, they have to enter the reason in the computer before the box, the drawer is open to give them the medication. Yeah, so they've got some very specific things that they have to say in there. So good progress. Feedback from the emergency department has been, it's not that horrible.
You've got good people working there.
Yeah, it's not. They thought it was going to be horrible, and it's not that horrible. And we have already had 2 medication events that would not have been disastrous, but they're still there. They were caught. It was a dosage. Both of them were dosage adjustments for pediatric patients. So it was nice to see that we did something right. We're in the right direction. All right. Barcode med administration. Thinking about meds being administered. So the 2 nurses in the room will completely understand when I talk about the 5 rights of med administration. Barcode med administration is key to 4 of those 5 rights. And just a quick reminder of what barcoding is. It's when the patient has a barcode on their wrist, the medication has a barcode, and you barcode both of those and make sure they match. And so you're confirming the right patient, the right medication, the right dose, and the right time.
Now, when I practiced, we didn't have that option, and I can tell you, it takes a while to do all those things if you don't have something where you can wand it and know that you've got the right patient.
Now it takes,
But sometimes they still ask the patient their name.
of course,
Well, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
yes. They will always ask the patient their name and before they get started. If the patient's capable, they will.
Regardless of the barcode, they ask us
Regardless of
for
barcode.
the name.
Yep, yep. Double checks are always good.
Can't show you too much.
So we made a declaration that we were at 92%. We were right at 92%, sometimes 94%, and we were proud of ourselves. We hurt ourselves patting ourselves on the back. And then we paused and said, let's do the math on that. We administer right around 15,000 medication administrations each month here.
That's amazing.
It
I'm
is, isn't it?
flabbergasted.
It
It's
is,
not
yeah.
that high.
15,000 times we administer a medication.
What's the average
Does
nationwide?
that include the 10
I
hour
can
scripts?
imagine.
Yeah, no, I
Does that
would
include
say that.
scripts?
No, this is
No.
actually, no, this is
Actually
this
in-house,
is-
okay.
pills,
Oh,
pills,
wow.
doses, injections.
Oh, okay.
IVs. So 15,000 times a patient is given something, one somethings from us. So 92% compliance, the math on that says, almost 1,400 times we did not leverage the safety features of barcode med administration, BCMA. And that's when we said, that's hard to walk out and feel good about that. And so we challenged ourselves to take it down. So we set a goal of less than 20 manual entries a month. So from almost 1,400 to 20, that was the goal that we set.
How'd you do?
So, first, right
Good
here's
job.
October.
Had to ask.
Here's where we are now, down to 297. Now, back at the beginning of the year, so December, January of 2018, we at that point in time, we really had gotten, our staff were very trained. There is no longer a staff training issue. From this, all of 2018 and on now, it's really about our systems. It's our systems, and sometimes it's about the technology, the hardware, having it work all the time, getting it replenished. There's some little maintenance things you have to do with them. Sometimes it is the barcodes. The barcodes didn't get registered in the system. Somebody thought they were registered and they weren't. I mean, there's just a collection of all these little things that we just keep. It's peeling the onion skin back. One little thing, one little thing, one little thing. And so, but look how far down we've gotten to 297. It's not done. This is just the most recent information that I have to share with you. So our goal is still 20. How we'll get there. You'll see in September, I did mark that we had a multi-hour system downtime, and so meds continue to be administered then, but you don't have the barcoding. So those are all manual entries. So to be honest to the numbers, there they are. But we also know why that popped up. Sorry, it took a long time on quality, but it's some good things for you all to know what's going on.
That was informative, thank you.
I just have one question. It just seemed to me on these, on that first page that you gave us, it seems like the national average is like better standard of care. Looks like their averages are better on the whole than the rest, than our state, not necessarily our facility.
Sometimes that number, the yellow number is always a bigger N. Sometimes the blue bar in the middle is just a few more than us, and we're one of those. We're one of the blue bar in the middle, because that's our state collaborative.
Oh,
Is
okay.
who that is. So sometimes our numbers, like the ones that aren't so hot, like the CAUTI, our number not being so great, we actually bring our group down. So that's part of what you're seeing too. And the yellow group that we're comparing to are mostly critical access hospitals, but they may not have the swing bed program that we do, and so they look more like a traditional PPS hospital. So it's another reason why they look better. But it's still a great benchmark for us to work towards.
Well, that makes sense then. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on quality? Are you guys okay with this display?
Yeah.
We'll use a few months and see what you think after a few months, see how they build.
Were there any categories or aspects of the report that we did not include in your report? I mean, as far as the national standard goes?
On here?
Yeah.
No, we pretty much talked about everything on these eight dashboard. Maybe I'm not understanding your question. There's also a multitude of other measures that we do that I just grabbed the dashboard measures that I thought you guys would find meaningful.
Okay, that's what I was
But
asking.
there's a lot of
There are
other
others
measures.
that, in your judgment, are not meaningful for us. Is that correct?
I hate to say not meaningful, I'm trying to just hone it down to something that's digestible. So
So
if there's-
we don't omit them because they make us look bad.
No,
It's-
no.
No,
No.
it's the same information in a different format that
Yeah.
we're getting.
Yeah, there's many of the things that we do because we're required to. It's part of a program we've signed up for, or it's something that we're really interested in measuring and benchmarking.
Yeah.
And we're not afraid. We're not afraid to find out where we need improvement.
In fact, I think we have a couple of extra than benchmarks than we had like a couple of years ago. We have a couple extra, so.
Yeah, so there's more than this. Just trying to not overwhelm you. Ready to go to the next topic?
Yes, I am.
All right.
Ready to move on? Yep, commissioners? Okay.
So the next topic here, this is probably going to take us 2 or 3 months to get through.
Oh, I'm not staying that long.
I know, so we'll just start with this one. This is the, you have the piece of paper. Who else
Yeah.
have it?
Ours is up, it's on there.
It's the one that's called Obligations Post-Affiliation.
It's the Word document.
And I'll tell you the,
What do you want to do on a page?
oh, I like this.
Okay.
Thank you.
So,
I like this. I'm just gonna- I like this mouse. There we go. Here's what Steve and I have been thinking, that it would be helpful for you all that we start looking at what does the work of the Board of Commissioners here look like after affiliation? Because there you need to be thinking about, so what's the staff support look like? What do we need to do as far as funding? Part of the agreement with Overlake is going to include, some, how do we put money into trust? How much of the tax dollars are kept for district work to be done? We can't get to those numbers until we figure out the what do we have to do, what's it cost to do what we have to do, and then the what do you want to do piece. So we can't really start with the what do you want to do piece until we deal with the what do you have to do. So this exercise is just to try, it's not intended at all to be definitive, but it's just intended to get us a starting point that says, here's the things that will still have to be done, because then the next step is, and what are the resources necessary to do the work. So what's been done is divided it up into groups. So the first group is all the things that are in this RCW that is going to define, these are the things that are done by a public hospital district board. Then the next grouping is all those things that have to do with finance, with management of money. Then there's going to be some HR things that have to be done. And then the other box there is, or the other collection is what I titled just things about business and real estate. They didn't naturally fit into the other spaces. And then you finally get to that section is the things that the group might decide they want to do, but they don't have to do. And so that will eventually get filled in. But I wanted you all to have a chance to look at this and maybe give responses of what you think about. Is this a longer list than you anticipated seeing? That the work of the board would continue to be, does it still make sense? Because what you're peeling off with the affiliation with Overlay is the management of hospitals and clinics. But the work of a public hospital district continues. So that's what this is.
How many people do we have to have employed by the district to be able to make sure that we meet our obligations post-affiliation?
I think that's gonna be the
That's
next
kinda
thing that we
one
do
out.
is, once we kind of agree that this is a good way to look at it, and you all may have a different, as you look at it, you may think there's a different way to approach it, because I think that will help us to do that next step, which is, and how many, not only how many FTEs is really your question, but how many people does that represent, and what skill set do those people need to have? Because it may be that you've got to have a couple, 3 people, because they bring different skill sets to the picture, they may be 0.4 FTE a person.
Contractors.
Those are the things that we have to work through, yeah. But we didn't want to start that work, and Steve will be doing a huge amount of this. Didn't want to start that work until you all were comfortable that this is kind of the body of work that we'll be building that dollar budget and people budget around.
Will the LOI look into all of this from overlay as well?
No, so the LOI does not.
Or what we're gonna be
recognize
discussing?
this.
Yeah?
The LOI doesn't deal with this, other than in the definitive agreement, we will need to come up with insight into how much money the district will need to retain available, you know, in freely accessible funds in order to continue to operate, to do the things that the district has to do. We're kind of taking a long route to get to that answer. I think at the same time, this becomes really valuable for thinking and for planning and just wrapping minds around what does the work look like.
Yeah.
Well, looks like a good list. Do you want comments on other items now, or are we going to
Sure,
talk about them
I'll take
later?
anything, because this is, you know, this was constructed by going through and looking at our CWs and
Right.
different documents, and so anything is valuable.
Okay, I've always thought, and after talking to a lot of the, actually 3 or 4 groups in the valley here that often go and request and petition for grants, I think there should be somebody that can coordinate the grant process part-time to make sure that we don't duplicate or compete against the other agency, the other groups in the valley, but we can obtain additional types of grants that may be not open to.
What kind of grants are you talking about? David?
Well, I was talking to one citizen, and she had mentioned that there's actually somebody we should probably talk to if we were going to go in that direction, so that the process in trying to get additional grants for our outreach or whatever programs that we want are not duplicated and competitive with
The other agencies
the other-
already in the
yeah,
valley.
Right, and we don't want to take away their money, so to speak, that is available. And so if we do go in that direction, I'm not saying we have to, but if we did try to get somebody that could do some grant writing, I think that would be, you know, we could provide matching, you know, through our funds, maybe, and really try to, you know, serve the people that are paying the taxes and things that we are indicated that are the problems and things that we should be.
Yeah,
So
that's an awesome skill set.
So if I understand what you're saying, it's to use some of the tax dollars to help support some of the other things that happen in the valley besides just
Yeah,
the
and that's
medical
basically
part.
it,
I
right.
mean,
And
okay.
you know, at one time we had a nurse up at the center up in Carnation, didn't we? And, you know, these are the kinds of things that we're growing older as a society. I don't know about this area, but it's growing older, but we, you know, as a society, we are growing older, and the elderly are getting, you know, on average a little older, and I think that's going to be a priority, as well as the other identification, mental health, drugs and alcohol issues. So those are things that I think we've already identified as a problem. Jean has mentioned the opiate crisis several times. We're doing our statutory duties and then some, according to our medication prescription, but there's more to do. So.
Yeah, something
As
like
far as
this.
grant writing, I was several months ago, I don't know if Mr. Parker left, and you know, I haven't heard from the Preservation and Development
Right.
Authority. What was the rationale behind whether we were declined for the budget, or what was? Because I remember putting together, you know, some of the the scenario and where the dollars
were-
ought to go? So I
yeah.
haven't heard anything.
We were declined for that grant because there weren't enough other collaborating similar entities around us, because they were really wanting to,
What, everything, okay.
like if Snoqualie Valley Community Network
Yes, okay.
was also petitioning for a similar grant, and then we could work together and have the dollars go further. They were looking for those type of relationships, and we just didn't have anything in this area where
But
they had those.
expanding the health education was also part of that, and we don't see too many of them. I don't know where.
And it's,
Oh, but
you're at the mercy of the people.
That's right.
Oh, okay,
I
okay, yeah.
really
Well,
think
we did try our grant writing here, but of course.
I think you're saying a grant writer, somebody who can manage a grant.
Yeah, I think, and it's gotta be more of somebody that just doesn't go out there and get grants, because it's gotta be, it's really gotta be
Yeah.
coordinated with other groups in the community, so we start taking away their money, then, you know, that's not a good thing, because they're already established and doing good things for the community. And so I think somebody, I don't know if we have to have a really full-time,
Yeah.
but perhaps a part-time one, and I don't know how these
Federal
things are
government
set up.
have many grants for hospitals, for rural hospitals, they have many grants.
Good thing,
I
you
got
know,
it jotted down.
yeah,
Yeah.
you could, not necessarily outreach, we could have special projects for the hospital for, you know, to increase our standard of care in certain areas. You know, it could be anything. And I definitely think that should be in our budget for anything like that. And you know, maybe we could, I mean, if Overlake was to say we need to have a grant so we can update our MRI system to get a full throttle, what is it, 24 slice or whatever it is, I don't know what it's, 3 or 5. You know, that's something that, you know, could be a possibility too, to help the hospital. So I don't necessarily say it's all for outreach. It could be something to improve the standard of health care.
I have a question on grant writer. Some people that are hiring grant writers, they don't pay them a salary. They are paid on it. Let's just say I'm writing a grant for $1 million. My question is a legal question, whether it is okay to pay that person, if that person was able to be awarded $1 million, at 10% or 15% or 20% out of that, whatever that person was able to be awarded. Is that legal to do, or is that somewhat?
On the face of it, it wouldn't appear to be legal.
Okay, so you must.
But there may be some way that, if based on success of the grant, not maybe necessarily a percentage, but just if you're successful in achieving the grant.
Right.
I don't know of any grant writers that work on a percentage basis, like
Many of them do.
a personal injury attorney would be, but
Okay.
a lot of organizations.
Contingency
Steer clear of those
basis.
guys.
But a lot of
Yes, it
organizations do
represents a lot of
contract
those.
with grant writers,
Yes.
and they share a grant writer because they all contribute a certain amount, and then they view. Dr. Whitcott may know this, but there were 2 recent grants that were awarded to 2 collaborative hospitals, some Pacific and Klickitat Valley for opioid, and they got $400,000 apiece, and that's
Wow.
going to go quite a ways for a rural public hospital to engage in this,
Mhm.
and they got some assistance. So I think sometimes there's part-time grant writers out there that you can put out an RFP and say we want grant writers to assist. And I think it's conceivable that you could find a way to incentivize them, but I wouldn't do it on a percentage of their success.
Well, but if you pay them right away big salary and it failed, they were never awarded, then I don't know, how do you recoup that?
I think you identify an agreement that says if you're successful in obtaining grants, we can renew your contract. If you're not, we don't renew your contract.
No.
So you create some kind of incentives.
I'm concerned about interaction between Overlake and us and things like, well, Mr. Spikers mentioned the nurse we used to send out to Carnation, Deborah Banker, registered nurse, wasn't it? Okay.
You are correct, we had a registered nurse there, and we also have Deborah Baker who goes out to labs. You're
Okay.
correct on both.
Well, the point is, Overlay can be in charge of the hospital operation and clinic operation, and that person, that registered nurse that we're talking about, would be under their control and not ours, as I understand it. Is that correct?
No,
Not
not if we employ
necessarily.
them. Not if we
But
employ them.
they're operating?
I'm sorry, I
You're-
can't understand the answer here.
Not necessarily. They don't, they could be part of us still, correct?
Correct. The things that, Overlake will be taking over hospital and clinic operations, as you just said.
Yeah,
And so it would be unlikely that they would continue to some of those outreach efforts. So those would be perfect things for the district to pick up and continue. And just to add a little clarity, the nurse program that we had at Snow Valley Senior Center, we no longer employ that nurse because they lost their adult day health program.
yeah.
That's what we were paying for the adult day health program. So that is already gone, but the lab services is still there.
So you envision that the district organization can have medical people
Absolutely,
as well as overlay?
absolutely.
Okay,
Yep.
that wasn't clear.
Yep, so you can do. And, the model for this is what was done up in Snohomish County when Snohomish #2 leased their hospital, leased Stevens to Swedish. And so it became Swedish Edmonds. But now all their resources went to being able to provide community services that weren't hospital based. So
Right.
so they set up a little clinic. I think it's an ad hoc clinic of sorts. It comes and goes, but it's for like immunizations and school physicals and flu shots. So different things that the
So
community
mobile
has need
clinics
for.
sort of,
There can be any number of
Yeah.
things that you do. And the other thing that's really I think valuable to have these conversations is when we get to the definitive agreement to drawing it up, we want to make sure that there's something in there that doesn't prohibit in any way doing things in the community.
yeah. Well, with respect to the Stevens Hospital and Swedish affiliation, Swedish poured literally millions of dollars into that. And that's one of the things I'm concerned about is how much is overlay going to pour into our operation?
I think the question first is, do we need overlay to pour money into our organization? And then in collaboration with them, decide what are our priorities?
Yeah, well, okay, that's fair enough. But are they prepared if we come up with a verdant type approach in education of the community and something like Stevens and Swedish have? Are they going to be amenable to investing like Swedish did?
So, well, there's a lot of things in that. A lot of the investments that Swedish had to make were because they had acquired a facility that needed a lot of capital investment.
Yeah, that's true.
So, and that's not the case here. But they really had to do some significant physical overhauls on the building.
Right.
Overlake's investment will be only in hospital-based practices and clinics, so they won't be investing in things that you all choose to do out in the community.
And I think too, we need to, for that to happen, we have to see a need, and the community has to want to have that need met. You don't want to pour money into something where the community doesn't see it as a need, so it has to be a
Couldn't agree more. But I'm thinking back to
collaboration between
Mr.
us.
Spikers having advanced the concept of a surgical suite, for example. And we even talked at one time about adding on to the building for something like that. And then I think Tom Parker said, no, we could probably find space in the building and so on. Do we want to expand services like that?
They are going to be doing essentially management services of the operations. They will end up having a lot of say, a lot of influence of what is happening here once the lease is in effect. One of the requirements that's right now been put in the LOI is an insistence on doing a fresh community needs assessment. In case what's learned is that there is a significant need for surgical suites that's not apparent to us right now.
And we also need to allow them to upgrade the facility if they want to, at their expense, because we don't want to limit them
Right.
in doing so. As far as the surgical, there's actually enough room for a medical office building on the property.
We had surgery here for a brief interval,
So
didn't we?
Not here.
there's enough for 8 or 10 offices, a building of 8 or 10 offices.
Well,
So that there is, but that's neither here nor there. It depends on how things go in the next several years before that.
You know, and there's gonna be a lot of things that can affect that. I mean, if we want to have day surgeries here where you're in and out, or whether it's orthopedic or other things, they're gonna want to have to invest, and the population is coming this way. So it's gonna have a greater need in the future. I don't wanna have to go into Seattle. I go to Pro-Liance on the east side. There's Pro-Liance in Seattle where I used to go. So if the community has the option of doing things closer to home, then I'm sure Overlake would probably rather do it maybe here than have to build a whole facility. But there's room, should they want to build another facility.
And as far as building a whole new facility, Overlake is only 25 minutes from our hospital.
That's true.
And I'm just a little skeptical that they're going to, let's say, for day surgery or something like that, that they would support us in that when the patient can go 25 minutes and be at their hospital. So I'm a little skeptical about that.
We'll wait in about 20 years. People won't want to use I-90.
But you are correct. They will not suggest doing a huge capital outlay for something that doesn't have an obvious need, an obvious return on investment, because it's a big investment for them to make as well.
That's true, and that brings up again what you mentioned, which are the Community Needs Assessment Survey, which we're required to do under the Affordable Care Act. And I presume it will be one for this community and not be combined with Overlake area. And don't we need to get started on that like now or yesterday?
I think by 2020 we need to have it done.
Yeah, it's a next year thing, I believe.
And we do maintain our critical access status, CH, regardless of the affiliation.
I believe we do one for 2018.
We can look again.
Pardon?
We can look
We
again.
can look.
Yeah, I think we haven't done the 2018.
I think the
report.
2018 was collecting other data.
Well,
Wouldn't it be
the other piece was, we were doing a community needs assessment before we were actually required to, and the requirement for us to do it only came into effect fairly recently. I don't remember exactly when.
Well, we did one with
The mayor's brother,
the
John
mayor's
Larson,
brother.
yes.
And
It
that
was
was
20
2016, I
Yeah,
believe.
or,
And that meant that 2 years later, 2018, we would do another one.
But that's when, that's the piece I'm saying, is that the timing isn't necessarily
They're
from
2
the
years,
last time we did it, it's from when we became obligated to do it.
So we did
And the
one.
obligation was first on the big hospitals,
Yeah, I
and
think so.
our obligation only came recently, and now I can't remember how recently that obligation hit.
I
And
thought
that's
they-
when our clock started.
I
is it
thought the
Overlake?
Affordable Care Act required you to do one every 2 years.
Gee, we don't know.
I just can't recall when.
I know, I'm not sure myself.
Isn't Overlake?
Well, anyhow, let's look at that.
Yeah, we'll obviously.
Overlake's gonna be
Because
doing
that'll
this
help
at
us
their
identify
expense,
needs.
so let's just wait.
yeah, that's what I know.
I
think
have
it's
a
okay.
question related to all of this. I see the community needs assessment, and I don't see that it's concerning the whole district. And that's kind of important to me, who lives outside Snoqualie, because
No, I think the last assessment that I saw included everyone in the district, including Preston, Carnation, all the statistics were in that particular
The
assessment.
one from Overlake?
No, from us,
Oh,
that
okay.
was done
Yeah.
2016.
well, no, I just want to make sure
Talking
that
about-
that is part of the whole thing.
Yeah.
I didn't
that's fine.
recall that they went out as far as Carnation for the question and answer thing, that we did
I
as
never
but
made
it
it.
was.
Just
they
maybe
didn't
sure
get
that when they do their
Statistics.
assessment, that it does include the whole district.
Yeah.
There.
Doesn't
I
it
knew
just
you were
for-
writing it down.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
all.
Okay, and I have on to another kind of subject. We are neighbors and friends with the people who own Carnation Farms now, and they are extremely interested in getting into whole food, foods and opioids and pediatric children, teenagers, and all of that, much like we do from this hospital over Jackson Glen, and, all of that kind of stuff. And I can give you his name and number. He said, have him call. The people who own Carnation Farms, her great-grandfather built the Carnation Congregational Church, the stone church. They were part of the Tolt before it became Carnation Farms. Okay, they were part of that whole thing, so they have, and he asked me for your name, so, and he said, give her my number.
All right. Very good. All right, so what we'll do next, now that you guys you're kind of okay with this being the scope of work, so the next thing that we'll do is just to try and take it to the next level, which is, what's the workload here? How many hours a month is necessary for this work? Start listing out what are the skill sets that are necessary to accomplish these things, and then how do you craft that down to, so how many people does that mean? Because, if you need 5 skill sets and only, maybe a person can only have 1 or 2 of those skill sets, suddenly your people number
Are going to,
increases.
yeah.
Even if you don't need them full-time, you still need those people at some portion of a person because of their skill set that they bring to the table. So we'll work on that.
Bullet 1 is public election board members.
Yes.
How many board members will we have after affiliation?
5.
Okay, will there be a requirement for new election of board members?
The affiliation will have no impact at all on your current PhD board work.
Okay,
And the way your cycles work and the way your
RCW
terms work,
terms.
those are unchanged.
I'd like to see us discuss sometime how we are going to interact with our equivalents from Overlake. That is, whether it's the board or advisory committee, or will there be some kind of intermediary organization, and how our board will interact with them? Because I don't think we can go through 10-year lease without talking with them about how the hospital is operating.
Right now, this is not finalized, but the way it's conceived of right now is that there will be a routinely scheduled report that will come to this board once a quarter, twice a year. That is undetermined, and the content, we'll have to decide exactly what is delivered, so that it's a very structured report, so that it comes all the time, because it'll give you insight into performance, because as a body, you need to know that they're being successful. Because otherwise, if they fail, then it comes back, and all the operations come back, and that's hard.
Well, that data is essential, but I'm thinking in terms of person-to-person contact between our board and their authority.
They will have, they will identify who that person is that will be that intermediary. I do not at all expect it to be board to board, just because
I
they
don't
operate differently.
No,
But
their board operates differently.
Yes, but it will be a somebody will be tasked to be that person, so that it's a predictable conversation.
Okay.
Any other questions for Dr. Whitcup?
Anything else, Steve, to throw in?
So you're going to give us what the cost would be for the mandatory obligations?
What we'll do is kind of figure out how much time we think that will take, and then we can back into the cost on that. So.
Oh, we want to look
And
at
yet, it's kind of time and how much time, and then what kind of expertise or knowledge base do the people have to have?
And you have to
That would
look
get
at
just kind of some costs on it.
how the costs seem to always increase with time because of, because of, no.
Yeah,
But I think
inflation
you're,
and
but
such,
you're
yeah.
absolutely right, David, we've
Yeah.
gotta
Yeah,
make
you
sure
know.
to not only say,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
skill set has this particular wage associated with it,
Yeah.
and then year after year, it's gonna
It's
creep
gonna go
up.
up.
And if some of the things in the very last bullet that we didn't fill out, just the things that we want to do,
Mhm.
they also are gonna need a skill set associated with them.
Mhm.
So if you're wanting to do some type of nurse services out, so there's a skill set right there
Mhm.
that's not gonna duplicate over to your finance.
And one of the things, Commissioner Spiker, I think you were trying to say, which I always try to guard against, is underestimating your costs. Because when you go into something like this, there's a big tendency to underestimate,
Yeah.
really. Yeah, and say, oh, and then you don't have a skill set. So it'll take some iterations to talk through it.
There's also some unpredictables that are regulatory and compliance requirements that are going to be hard and a challenge for Steve to predict. 10 years ago, you didn't have public records officers. You didn't have the compliance regulations that you had. You didn't have the PDC requirements. You didn't have the Open Public Meeting Act requirements. So each of those regulatory enhancements that come down from the legislature or from CMS or from Inspector General, and it just goes on and on and on, then you have to realize, do we have that capacity? Are we going to use FTEs for that? Are we going to contract for that? But that's the skill set that I think is really challenging. I was just looking through what Steve and Dr. Whitcock put together here, and this is a great start, but some of it's the unknowns.
Really?
So
Yeah.
speaking of that, if one's overlay, getting into the operational, that would separate the hospital, the board commissioners, from having its own administrative function.
Well, you
So-
still have some administrative
Yeah, we would.
Would
functions.
we hire someone, because I don't know if
Yes.
Valerie will continue to serve as our.
You're actually getting where we're
You're
going.
getting kind of
You're
where
getting
we're
there.
going.
In that
Yeah, that's what
this-
I'm
this ent-
clarify, I just want
all
to make sure
this-
that we're not.
All the staff right now that support the function of the board also support the hospital,
Okay.
and that can't continue after affiliation. So it's not so much a matter of who goes where, but the
That's
fact,
my
but the
question.
fact that there will have to be
Somebody in
a
that
skill
position.
set
Yeah.
associated with the work of this board. And some similar skill sets will remain with the hospital. What name tag those people are wearing, we don't know right now.
Yeah.
But we just do know skill sets, because we need to start identifying who's, either who is the right person or who's the right ones to hire.
Now, is there also the question of where the funds come from to hire or to have
Yeah.
those positions?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
all of a sudden now, if we need our secretary, I assume that would come out of our tax dollars that
Yeah,
support
there's
us.
some tax
We will
revenue.
need-
Okay,
We will also need a financial person. Who would they report when we're collecting? Or let's just say we're acting as the property manager, the leasing.
Right.
We have to have someone that collects.
Right.
Who's that person?
That's what we're gonna
And
have to.
who would they
that's-
report to?
That's.
And then that's what we're gonna have to
But
kind of shake
you're gonna
out.
have to have a
Okay,
superintendent.
maybe I've gone to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know you're just seeing this, but as you
Yes,
take it
yes.
home and digest it, you'll
Yes.
see, so there's a superintendent on here that's to be able to, oversee the work of the district.
repayment schedules of tax dollars,
Mhm.
revenue
Yeah,
bonds, so you need
managing dollars,
finances,
yeah.
HR policies, you're gonna
Okay.
need HR, yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I could see probably 3 positions that could be contracted out of this. Maybe there's 6 skill sets here, but there's 3. And that's
Yeah, you
not
could-
looking at the other items at all.
You can combine some of the skill sets into, one person have 2, 3.
Yeah.
So,
And this exercise, we may not get as far as, do you hire, do you contract? The solution may need to wait for later, as long as we know a solution for this problem space has to come. Either hire or resolve.
Yeah. And it's always good to put time on something, otherwise sometimes it gets.
Sounds good.
Well, the time limit is when the affiliation occurs, so.
The clock starts ticking.
And that's actually kind of the startling piece to remember, is there's going to eventually be a definitive agreement signed, and the day that it's effective, the next day, all of this has to
I know.
kind of start. We have to be ready for it to change.
Okay, so where are we? I think it gets us to the due diligence affiliation update.
Just update there, we are in due diligence phase. So we have been, I won't take time to pull it up, but we have been presented with, Steve, how many pages long?
Oh, 25 pages.
25 pages of things to deliver.
No.
So they're
Some of them don't
prioritized.
apply, so
Right.
still.
So the delivery is a message that says this
We don't
doesn't
have that.
apply. We don't have any of these, so we still have to answer it. So we're into it. So we're right now working on constructing
Is
the.
this some form we're filling out?
No,
It's-
it's documents
it's-
we need to give them, documentation.
And that is in response to their request,
Correct.
in response to the LOI?
In response to the due diligence section. So
Of
we,
the due diligence section of what?
of the affiliation process. So the LOI can't be signed until the overlay board meets in March. And we made a decision, the LOI is unnecessary. It's not a barrier for us moving forward into the due diligence phase. So we already have the NDA in place, and so we are moving on so that we don't lose time waiting for the every other month meeting cycle of the overlay board. So that's why we've jumped into the due diligence phase in a very official way. So there's a collection of documents that we will be delivering to them. We're creating right now a safe space for those documents to be placed so that they stay, what is it, a clean room?
Clean room,
A
it's a
clean
clean
room?
room.
What
It will
about their
start
end?
changing.
Are they
Yes.
also part
So
of
we
their, are they also going to provide us with that?
Yes. And so
Moving
we're-
forward without the LOI yet?
We're working on our list.
Okay.
We're developing our
I
plans
just
for
don't
them.
think that we should just,
No, no.
I mean, it's very unfavorable if we allow that.
Well, it's
we
not
can-
an allowing, it's just as part of,
Yeah,
it's
yeah, I
part of
know.
how you do this,
Yeah,
is
but
you
it should be a fair
you both
game.
exchange information.
Yes.
Their list is going to be a lot longer than ours
Mhm.
as far as what we need to see. Our questions are very different, our positions are very different. They are the ones incurring a significant amount of risk. So of course they're gonna ask for more. Our questions are not as lengthy. And so, so we're in the process of putting together our list as well.
You know, I think one thing we need to keep in mind is that even if it were Johns Hopkins or the Mayo Clinic coming in here, the people in the valley have to accept it. And so what I'm wondering is, who's going to perform the outreach and public information and that part, the marketing and so forth of the hospital under these changed conditions? Because, you know, if they say that this is a foreign intruder into our community hospital, if that's the attitude they take, then we're going to lose
Right. I think that's
patients.
the beauty of doing this with Overlake.
I agree.
I think we already have in our possession evidence that many people in the valley choose with their car to go to Overlake.
Yeah.
And there's some other choices that they make, but at least we know that a very significant portion do make that choice. And so we at least know that vote is.
It's not a foreign agent like coming in. It's a very familiar.
Is there going to be an ongoing need for public information,
For marketing?
outreach, and
Absolutely.
marketing and
Yeah,
so forth?
operationally,
And
that's
whose responsibility will that
Overlay.
be? That will be ours.
No, it'll be Overlake.
It'll be overlays, but I thought
Yes.
they were really
It's
focused
gonna be
on
their
just the
Yes,
medical
hospital,
side.
yes,
so-
we don't have to worry about that. That's operationally, that is all under their,
They're
yeah, under their
highly
umbrella.
motivated to grow volumes because they have a lease
That's
to
right.
it.
But I'd like to see something from them about what their plans might be in that regard, and whether they really accept that responsibility.
Oh, they, absolutely, absolutely.
That's
they
okay.
do.
Too, I
those-
mean, if
Those
you
kind
look,
of questions are actually on
I
the
think,
villages list that we're looking at,
Yeah.
that's on Brian's stuff.
And I think too, if we look at Overlake, if you drive by, you can see they are growing. They need space, and there was no other place to go. Before Swedish got here, we all went to Overlake. So Overlake does have a footprint in the valley. To think that they don't is really being naive. They have a footprint here.
Yeah, that's true.
and one of the beauty, I think, Overlake is never affiliated, never partnered or collaborated with any other entity. Okay, I don't think
They
so.
have Kaiser,
No,
No.
no.
They just have a,
They're a-
space
yeah.
sharing, but
Yeah,
they
they
not
never
really.
really-
They have
Yeah,
a
not up-
necklace or
So-
a network of clinics. If
Oh,
you,
really?
if you
Yes.
go online and you
Mhm.
look up Overlake Hospital, you'll see these clinics all around. Yeah, but to my knowledge, they have not affiliated
Yeah, so
or
that's,
merged with any organization.
Maybe our hospital
No,
will be
Kaiser-
treated like a newborn child.
Kaiser takes over what, what was it that used to be in Bellevue? Group Health, yeah, it's Group Health.
Yeah,
And that was where Group Health was, as they were dying, and Kaiser came in, and it's a separate entity.
You're
Yeah,
correct, you're
I
correct,
agree.
Jean.
It
This
has
is
nothing to
new.
do with Overlake.
Yeah.
does it?
yeah.
This is new territory for them to
Yeah.
do an affiliation at this level.
Yeah.
And they'll be the first to tell you that, so
Yeah.
they're treading, they're moving forward cautiously, because they
So
don't
yeah.
have experience
should,
in
yeah.
this arena.
Yeah.
So we're equal in that regard.
Yeah. Okay,
The last,
question,
the
open
last
discussion.
agenda item is just kind of to open it up to say, other questions?
So, are we set on this lease purchase type thing of model? Lease purchase,
Well,
option?
lease, there's
There's
Is that-
nothing about a purchase,
This is
There's
no
a
purchase.
Okay, I just
There's
wanna
a-
make sure.
but there might be a
It's just a
purchase
lease.
7 years out,
Oh,
or 6
no,
years
not
out.
even 7 years.
6 years.
We're
It's
talking
only a
about a
lease.
10-year
The
lease.
revenue bond.
Yeah, so are we
Lease,
set
right?
on that
Set.
model, leasing?
That is the
Probably
model
goes to the
that
bond
is
you call it,
currently
which
being.
Which is
worked
about
on.
6.5 years.
Yeah,
By the
6.5, 7 years. About
Okay,
six-
okay, wait,
six,
wait.
six and a half.
Okay.
You guys, everybody's talking at once. We got a
do
conversation
it
here,
so
we got
well.
conversations over there. We need to take our turn.
Hey.
So,
My first question, that's okay, now, yeah, thank you.
did you two get your discussion done and answered? Yes?
Yeah, my question is, are we set on that leasing option then?
That is the one
That
that
is the
we
one.
all, everyone has looked at it, everyone has concurred that that's the direction that
And
we're
my
going to
question
move
to the
forward.
board, are we okay with that leasing option?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm
I
still
just wanna
not
make
clear.
sure, I mean, I just.
Let's ask him.
I think I saw somewhere that we're talking about a 10-year lease, and now tonight I hear something about 6 years, 7 year.
The lease, the lease, there is an option to transition to purchase, but that can't be entertained until the revenue bonds go through their first cycle.
But even not considering that, we're talking about a 10-year lease, are we not? Rather than 6 or 7?
No,
I thought
it's-
somewhere in the LOI or somewhere I saw
No.
a 10-year
No.
lease statement. Well, we gotta remember that this is a very short time, and will they really get committed in a short period of 6 years or so? Remember, Roger McCullum was here 12 years, so that went by pretty fast. And so if we're talking about 6 years, that's such a short time, I'm just skeptical about how much they'll put their heart into this.
let's
Oh,
go
they're
for
gonna
it
hit
and
the
wait
ground
and
running.
Yeah.
If
They've gotta make a
Yeah.
they
move.
put money into this,
They will
they're,
hit the ground running.
yeah, they're not gonna wanna just, you know,
How much money are they putting into it?
that's one thing we're gonna be
That's
looking at.
determined.
Okay.
I think at least at the beginning, everybody's gonna have some attorney fees and some things like that, just in our pre-discussions of what we're gonna do and how it's gonna pan out.
Just-
Yes,
so
Steve.
You're gonna have to see the agreement that's presented before you can answer definitively, Jean, your
Yeah.
questions. Your questions are probably 3-4 months down the road.
There's no definitive agreement yet, but
Yeah.
the LOI that was discussed has reference to the initial term of the agreement will be to December 1, 2025. So that's about
6 years, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I saw
6
that
years.
somewhere.
Thank you.
That's fine, thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah.
If no other questions, I have one other thing, I'll just let you take one and pass it down.
Yes, ma'am.
And this was something, Mr. Pollard had asked, just curious about what does it look like when we send our employees their raise notification? So thought we'd just bring everybody a copy. This is over in the world of operations, but it seems like a great education just for y'all to see what goes out. So this is for you to take home. You can read it. There's no individual employee information on there. This is just the template that we use for the letter to give them some idea of what their pay raise is going to be for the year. So they all just got this last week. They've been really pleased with it.
So I guess 4 out of 5 commissioners seems to be okay with the leasing option. Am I right? Or Mr. Commissioner Pollard, you're not agreeing to
The
the lease
leasing
option?
is what we've talked about from the beginning. The lease purchase is something I don't believe I've been in discussion about. So of course, if we're gonna go forward with overlay, we're talking about a lease.
Yes, yeah.
So why would I be opposed
Oh,
to
okay.
that?
Well, one thing I
The
would,
majority of the board wants to go that way.
one thing I'd love
Yes,
to
sir.
have is an option price for this possibility of purchase, and that could be waived when they actually purchase the property, but if they don't purchase, then we get the $1 million. That'll kind of put them in the seat of wanting to really get this thing going very well.
Different than the
Look, it's a
trust,
regular lease.
the money that's been set aside.
What kind of
as a
money?
trust. So there's the money that's being set aside in the trust account
No.
that is for, neither side can touch it
Mhm.
until the end of the, till 2025
Mhm.
comes. And then what has to be decided is, and then who gets it, we have to put
That
guidelines
should be
around
there.
that.
Yeah,
But it's intended for if one or the other is to pull out, leaving the other kind of scrambling, to
Yeah.
put things back together, that money will be available
whoever.
to jumpstart getting back into business.
Well, I kind of think that
Are you suggesting different?
Commissioner Powell has a little foresight and worried that in 6 years, they may not be going very well, and they may just give the reins back to us. And it sure would be nice to have some, a little bit more incentive for them to stick around and purchase the property. And it would be nice if we had something in an escrow account for that period of time, interest bearing, of course.
That's part of the,
No, it's separate from what, the pulling out is not different. It's a specific purpose. They don't buy it, they lose this money.
okay, here's, and I'm not arguing with you,
Yeah.
I promise, because that never goes well. When the conversations Tom and I and Kim had was that we would set up a trust account, and some of the excess tax revenue would go into that account. Some of our current unrestricted cash would go into that account, and that would build up, and then there's a pot of money. And I have a prediction what the pot of money is somewhat. And then if Overlake walks away, the district gets that, because you need some cushion. If Overlake,
During the lease, they walk away.
if Overlake
At the end of the lease.
So we're talking about the
at
end
that
of the lease.
2025
End of the term.
date,
Okay.
that's when the bonds are callable. In other words, the bonds can be paid off. And then Overlake can make the decision, okay, this is going good, we're gonna pay off the bonds. And they probably get access to that cash, some of that money, because they could then make some.
But it's our money, right?
Okay, but I'm just saying,
Not
this is not set in stone, but is what the thought process was.
Yeah.
They get access to some of that money, because they're now taking on all the risk, more risk, they can't walk away. If they walk away, the district needs some money to say, okay, how do we now
Reorganize.
re-up?
Okay, how much money are they putting forth? I mean, I would think that they have to put up a couple million, and they lose it if they walk away in
There-
2025.
I,
And we get our money that's sitting.
I don't have numbers off the top of my head, and a lot of it is going to depend on the outcome of this process that Kim just went over, Because how much of the tax revenue does the district need to spend on operations, and how much can go into that fund, that trust account?
Well, I think we match it with them. We put our matching money in there and they put their matching money. I don't care how much it is, just enough to make the incentive for them to want to stick around and purchase the property.
So the
So-
trust account would belong to both
Okay.
overlay.
Well, I really want to
The
take
trust
very
account
close term,
belongs
really
to
look
a
at
trustee
that,
who
because,
lets neither of us touch it until the time is right by the contract.
Okay, but if I heard you earlier, you said that overlay will have access to
If-
that account if they need some supplemental.
No, it would be if they buy out, if they pay off the bonds
Yes,
and own the hospital and take over all operations, and they said, okay, we're gonna relieve your debt, we're gonna pay $68 million.
so the access, they can take that trust
They
account.
can take, I mean, that's
Everything
the
will belong to
thought, that's, no
Yeah,
one
yeah,
signed
yeah.
anything on
Sure,
this.
yeah, yeah.
That's just the thought process.
Right, right. I'm
but
just-
if they don't decide to purchase the hospital.
Then they don't get, you know, that, I mean,
But
and-
again, they don't get our money, but
Right.
we need to get their money.
Well,
See how that works? We see if they don't stick around, we need to get their money.
They will be putting money in because they are paying us a lease payment above our debt service. They're
So we're
paying-
making money off of
They're
them
paying
essentially.
5%
would be very
above our debt
successful.
service.
We can
to
take
us.
over, we don't need.
I say we do matching, put in 5 million, they could put in 5 million, and we'll have 10 million plus if they walk away.
All right.
I don't know, I'm just saying.
Yeah, yeah,
I want
It's all
more of an
scenario.
incentive for them to stick around and purchase.
Okay, if you guys don't want me to hit this, John, do you have something you'd like to
Hit us.
say?
Well, I'm gonna say, I think we've had enough discussion.
So does that mean you want to adjourn?
That would be not bad.
If you would like to make a motion,
Well,
we can first ask, has everybody got their, anything else pertinent or concern that's great that they really feel they need to ask a question?
Yeah, this is that time, that's why we had more study
That's
session
right.
to discuss.
Commissioner Paul.
Not ask a question, but we've covered a lot of very complex thoughts tonight.
That's correct.
And so I want to see this as step one in the process.
absolutely.
We have a long way to go,
Yeah.
and so this was just an introduction to the
Oh, yeah.
future.
Oh, yeah.
This work here
Yeah.
will take us, we'll see it again in February, maybe not in March, but again in April,
Yeah.
and maybe May, because the building on this work is gonna take a while. And then on the other side is the building of the definitive agreement,
Right.
that we have to do it simultaneously, but they both inform one another.
And this has been good tonight because there's a lot of thought stimulus here, and some of it will require reflection.
Yes,
And so that's all
that
I
would be
wanted to make.
excellent, that was our purpose, was
Yeah,
to
that
kind
was
of
cool.
Start thinking about
get
it.
some thinking going, because when we come back in future months, to be able to do downloads on those spots.
Right.
Yep.
Just remember this thought, one in the hand is worth 2 in the bush. You need to have that money in trust.
This is a man that goes bird hunting.
And you put salt on their tail, right?
All right.
The Rolling Stone gathers no law.
Well, sit yourself.
I made the motion to adjourn, come on.
All those
let's
in
go.
favor say aye.
Those were good. Bad sayings.